God damn it, I'm so...
Oh, sorry, I wasn't expecting visitors today. Okay, so you guys know what nostalgia bait is, right? Like most of us know what that means. Am I doing that right now? I kind of just felt like making some Bloodborne videos again, but some idiot put this seed into my brain yesterday and now I don't know how to get rid of it. Anyways, runes! You can loot them, you can stack them, you can sell them. You probably shouldn't do that, actually. You probably, none of these respawn. I think like one of these respawn. Giving build advice for a system that already makes it plain enough what runes complement one another kind of feels like unnecessary padding, since I'm assuming most people my age read at a 5th grade level, and I can only repackage the phrase use visceral attack runes if you use visceral attacks so many times before it stops sounding like coherent English, which is why the performance I'm primarily concerned about is gonna be what you get from a traditional 1-2-3 stack of the same rune family, or I guess a 3-4-5 if we're talking about Communion or Formless Oedon. Also, I know a lot of the tier 3 variants of these involve dungeon raiding in some way, so if you're on console or you just don't feel like using a save editor, I've got some resources in the description. Number 21, Great Deep Sea. The sea of inadequacy and restriction on display here is certainly great and unquestionably deep, and when other sea-type runes are practically falling from early game and mid-game locations like coconuts from palm trees, the Great Deep Sea rune loses on almost every front, awarding 300 resistance to each ailment when tripled up, which granted is a pretty huge bonus, but this isn't a game like Elden Ring where you can build entire characters around the foundation of using spells that accumulate status, while also being able to resist other different ailments that might be used against you in the meantime. That's not really a thing in this game. Just like off the top of my head, I can think of one attack that actually builds up a self status, and it's the L2 on the Bloodletter, meaning if you're going to fight planning on using this attack, you've almost definitely made adequate preparations and brought along some sedatives anyway, or at least I think you should. I think that's a good precaution. It's also not a very spammable attack either. Like the recovery time on this attack, what the fuck, whatever, go watch the weapons video, okay? This rune sucks, is the point, is what I'm saying. Frenzy resistance is really the only thing worth building into anyways, since the punishment for being afflicted is so much more severe. The remaining 2 status ailments can be mitigated by the same 2 items, the Choir Bell and Antidote, and Slow Poison is the only status ailment that can be cured after you're already afflicted with it. It's also one of the only runes that require venturing into 2 different chalice regions, since only the tier 2 variant can be found during mainline progression. Number 20, Clear Deep Sea. With Rapid Poison seeming a bit confused between the definitions of rapid and fucking immediately, the concept of Slow Poison as a status ailment becomes far less threatening than it already was, but the somewhat early locations they can be found make it to where traversing the poison lakes in the frontier area don't feel like some ridiculous hazard you're not equipped for. But even this game, as old as it is, has a couple good demonstrations of the age-old approach FromSoft has had with poison ailments, which is to secretly make 2 of them and then hide the stronger one from you so that it's scarier when it happens. And no, I'm not talking about Rapid Poison, I'm talking about the mutated, protein-eating strain of Mega Turbo AIDS you get hit with when fighting the Blood-Starved Beast. There's the default poison strain, which is clocked in at 12 HP plus 0.1% of your max, and then this hyper-mutation bullshit virus BSB slaps on you with a reduction of 6 HP lost plus 0.2% of your max per tick. And the damage ticks are 5 times faster than normal poison. What the fuck? Traversing some poison lakes in the Nightmare Frontier takes so long to get through that the resistance doesn't really even matter unless you're triple stacking them, and then it's just like, you don't care that much. I'm sorry, you just don't. It's the only status ailment of the 3 that allows you to cure it after it's already been procced, since the other 2 have instant consequences, and no, I'm not counting Beasthood as a status ailment, because it's not a status ailment, like it's fucking Beasthood. There's almost never any real purpose to dedicate an entire rune slot, let alone 3, to extra poison resistance, when I could be using them for anything else, if I'm being honest. Fucking, someone's gonna bring up the one lantern in the swamp cave in the frontier, and they're gonna be like, yo, what if the slow poison kills me there? Like, brother, fuck the slow poison, okay? Build into frenzy resistance. That's the shit that kills you. Number 19, Stunning Deep Sea. Slow and rapid poison are completely different beasts. I've repackaged this statement 16 times, I think, in the past 5 minutes, so if you still ain't getting it, then it might be time for me to whip out the chalkboard. Whereas slow poison is well, slow, at least slower than the rapid variant. Rapid poison, contrary to how, language works, is actually an instant loss of HP all at once with no gradual effect whatsoever. It's just a smaller frenzy affliction is all it is. Rapid poison, however, is still not nearly as threatening nor as present as its feverishly fatal counterpart. Maybe I'd have it equipped versus headless bloodletting beasts in Chalice dungeons, or against some of Murgo's attendants. Fares against the Queen pretty well. Like, there are certainly places in which to be fearful of it, but it just feels like the total amount of creatures out there coming at you with rapid poison in their utility belts is just way too few and far between. And even still, getting afflicted with it isn't like oppressive levels of debilitating or anything. Like, you just have a little heart attack and that's it. It's 3% of your max HP and then 250 HP on top of that. You could lose this much HP getting hit with a torch or just like punched in the face or something. And one sneaky visceral with blood rapture equipped just heals it all the way back anyway and then some. I thought it would be pretty similar to how bleed has worked in other games that came after it, but it's actually not. A lot of its power comes from the flat HP reduction and not the percent reduction, which usually it's the other way around, and why it ends up being so scary. It's only scary in the parts of the game where you almost never need to worry about it. Nothing at all like the massive tub of HP lost via frenzy affliction by comparison. Number 18, Great Lake. Oh, shit. So we're talking about defenses now? Okay. Alright, I guess it's time to pull out the chalkboard anyways. Alright, fuckers, attention to the front of the room, please. Due to how armor defense works in Bloodborne, everything multiplies upon itself. That means the X. You know what the X means? Here's what I'm rocking right now, for instance. The Ardeo, the Noble Dress, the Constable Gloves, and the Decorative Pants. Let's just look at base physical defense to make everything easier. For each piece of attire, the physical defenses measure in at 50, 50, 60, and then 70. We can think of 10 defense in a damage type as like 1% of defense versus that damage type. So the way you would math this out would be 1 times 0.95 times 0.95 again, times 0.94, and then times 0.93, giving us a total of 0.78, I'm just gonna call this roughly like 21% physical defense. If this explanation is too long-winded, just press triangle twice in the stats menu and look at your damage defenses in the lower right. Whatever that number is, divide it by 10, and that's your defense percent. Now, here's what happens when you slap a defense rune on top of that. And since this is technically being written under the Great Lake entry, I'll just use the 5% you get from its tier 3 variant as an example. Taking the number we arrived at before and multiplying it by another 0.95 brings our total physical defense to around 25%. Doesn't exactly sound like the 5% you're promised on paper, but testing it versus a standard axe hit from a huntsman, the 209 damage I took here with the rune equipped is exactly 5% less than the 220 damage I took without it. Let this be a cautionary tale. Like, I get that it makes this number increase by way more than 5%, but sometimes 5% is just 5% because the game said so. I don't know what else to tell you. Math is stupid sometimes. There's a huge case for defense runes in cursed dungeons where that defense is pulling way more weight, but even still, if I know what I'm going up against, I'm better off tailoring my rune selection to the damage type I'm gonna be most threatened by in that situation. If I know the boss is an amygdala, for instance, let's say I can confidently dodge around the physical attacks well enough, but I still occasionally get ass bumped by the arcane AoEs on its slam attacks. In this case, I would probably just triple stack the arcane runes and then thug out the rest of it. Approach the lake runes with this kind of thinking, and there's very little reason to ever equip this. Number 17, Formless Oedon. Look, I'm not saying there isn't a place for it. Dumpsters all over the world are filled with much worse, but with the application of blood bullets, you are allowed to keep a constant supply of punishment going for your targets as long as you have the inventory to manage it. And the trade-off for those bullets being a chunk of HP actually carves out quite a comfortable window for a good stack of communion runes. So as long as you have a reliable means of staying healthy, you will have reliable access to quicksilver bullets to boot. And on that front at least, the communion runes will pull ahead by a pretty staggering amount. Normally when the playing field is this lopsided between two different bonuses or items or whatever, I would start digging around to see if there's room for a potential case to be made in the weaker one's favor. And given enough time for excavation, that's usually something I can hat trick out of my ass with relative ease, but when all you have to do is remember a button on your controller exists for the answer to suddenly become obvious, it might just be time for me to accept that's a piece of luggage that just ain't gonna fit on this flight. Number 16, Beast. Okay, so here's my problem with Beast. Beasthood is very picky about how its effects get applied. I think it's privy to getting compared to things like Winged Sword Talisman just because the effect increases your attack power depending on your combat aggression. But Beasthood's still, like, it's very different. It marches to its own tempo. Beasthood hovering around the range from 1 to 24 returns a 20% physical damage boost in exchange for a 20% defense deficit, meaning you can immediately start receiving its helpful effects after just one successful attack while under a Beasthood buff. From 25 to 49, the bonus and deficit respectively become 30% more and less, growing to 40% when your Beasthood climbs to 50, 50% when it climbs to 100, 60% at 200, and then finally a 70% difference if your Beasthood is 300 plus. Stacking it any further than this isn't exactly pointless, since you're giving yourself more time to stay in that 70% zone if a fight slows down and your Beasthood gauge starts depleting, but you're still not going anywhere above a 70% increase in damage dealt. This means Beasthood enthusiasts are usually only going after the full triple stack because they've likely already cultivated a setup with naturally high Beasthood, spending every last bit of insight as soon as they find it, and now they're looking for that extra pump that guarantees enough room for one extra stage of the effect, possibly even two. Even with a Beasthood build, I can still think of some not so fringe cases where I would be more tempted by a support-based rune like Communion or Guidance instead of going for the full triple stack. If you're still somewhere around the early to mid game and you're concerned you're losing out on extra Beasthood somewhere, just slapping on a rune to remedy that is kind of a bad fix because your selection of attire already gives you pretty decent control of your max Beasthood. The Ashen Garb, for instance, can be acquired in the early game and gives you a nice sexy 70, with the full Ashen set fattening that bitch all the way up to 176. Plus a regular dumping of your insight is also just, it's something you should kind of be doing anyways, and for Beasthood builds, you'll want to keep that shit at a perfect 0 at all times. So if your Beasthood is low, I would check those two things first. Number 15, Moon. What in the goddamn shit y'all needing this many echoes for, son? Leveling up is not hard. There's 80,000 echoes per refresh hiding behind one of the game's most low-effort accidental jokes, but even speaking generally, higher-level Chalice dungeons just cough up such an enormous wealth of echoes that grabbing a Saw Spear and a couple air runes and running it down Lower Loran for an hour fattens up your bank account with more than you'd ever need. Humorously enough, this is the only Carol rune set that doesn't involve Chalice dungeon raiding whatsoever, even for its highest tier. So if you just really hate the idea of interacting with chalices that much, then I guess that's exactly what the Moon rune is here for. And you can't even get your hands on the latter two that actually do enough to matter worth a shit until all the way at the tippity top of the endgame that involves Fortnite emoting in front of the nightmare brain of Reddit moderation. And 30% still just doesn't really feel that much. Like, it looks like a lot when you're actively using it and you're watching the number go up when you're killing shit, but I feel like you kinda need to be stacking tiers if you want to gain anything of real significance with this. Stacking them all together gets you around a 71% increase in total since all the bonuses are multiplicative, which, don't get me wrong, that's a huge chunk of change, but if farming for echoes is something you're planning on doing because you're trying to sprint to max arcane as quickly as possible, I would still just rather use the air runes. Triple stacking that shit gives you such a larger bonus with a playstyle that's already so widely preferred, easily buffable, and so blatantly optimal that you'd be a sucker not to at least dabble. Pop open an FRC and parry like 5 things and you'll be walking away with enough capital to purchase a football team. Number 14, Deep Sea. The only resistance rune I would actually highly recommend. Being a resistance rune dedicated to a specific status usually has the consequence of just being bound to a very low utility ceiling. These runes are almost always designed to not be mainstays in any build, but instead as a temporary slot in to make waddling through the lakes of pig syphilis just slightly less irritating, or to make certain enemies that attack with a certain status slightly less alive. This judgment, however, does not carry over to the Deep Sea rune. At least not as much. Frenzy is the perfect vehicle of terror that brilliantly contextualizes how hard these hunter types really had it out here. This rune doesn't even need to work differently from the other sea runes. Like, the type of status it chooses to prevent gives the rune inherently more value. And all because of how fucking painful it is to deal with the status itself. Frenzy snags the gold medal for the most threatening status ailment in the game with minimal effort. Rapid Poison's biggest damage comes from a flat HP loss instead of a percentage, so it won't take take a huge vitality investment for it to just not feel that scary anymore, and slow poison doesn't really even need an immediate answer to its problems. Sometimes it's better to just clear the Space AIDS lake prior to removing it, and shit, for all I know, you might be trying to trigger some blood gem effects or something. I don't know your game. What I do know is that the Frenzy status comes equipped with a signature 1-2 punch combo of unrivaled terror and inconvenience, and by 1-2 punch, I don't mean that at all. It's more like 12. This status gets packed with so many different little headaches and knowledge checks that frenzy resistance from any source just becomes insanely valuable in such a self-evident way. HP loss is percent based, allowing it to consistently be a threat no matter where you're at in the game, builds up over time, sometimes persisting way after the source of it no longer even gives a shit about you. It's the only status that doesn't get negated by the choir bell. Grinding too much insight can sneakily wear away at your frenzy resistance once you get to 15, but can also start changing enemy equipment. One such case being the church servants that wield crucifixes, who are given weapon buffs that inflict frenzy. The most consistent dealers of frenzy are given a separate combat advantage that saps your HP on top of the frenzy buildup, making attempts to heal through the damage burst instead of using a sedative pretty much impossible to do safely. The sudden and overbearing appearance of this status during the endgame, where the player's insight is most likely to be high, can often catalyze these perfect storms of bullshit. Sometimes they get so perfect that it feels like there was legitimately no other option except to just take your lumps and go next. This status is one of the most terrifying ideas to have ever come from a Soulsborne game. It's literally a jump scare in the form of a HUD icon. Hunters couldn't eat their cereal in the morning with 100% confidence it wouldn't send them into cardiac arrest. Number 13, Guidance. Guidance comes with a combat advantage that's really good at pretending it's useless. So the Guidance rune has a very specific lineup of weapons it prefers to be paired with that can bring out some of its finest inner strength, but there's no explicit attribute or indication that says a given weapon is good for rallying outside of just observing its performance in combat after being hit. There's no stat dedicated to it in the menus or anything, so if you were playing this as it dropped, finding a good rally weapon was unfortunately just kind of a lost science. You can affix rally potential gems to a weapon, sure, but it's obviously just way better to do this on a weapon with higher innate rally to begin with. And this can make it pretty easy for a negative opinion on this rune to immediately start taking root, just because you happen to be test driving it with a bad rally weapon. In practice, slap fighting fuckers into submission with Guidance is one of the best farming tools for blood vials because it makes healing with blood vials so unnecessary that your storage total just passively increases over time due to how much you're not using them. Weapons like the axe, the bloodletter, the transformed states of Burial Blade and Chikage, all of those have rally potential that feed beautifully into Guidance rune bonuses. There's still no tier 3, even after 11 years of searching and cope, which is a pretty huge strike against it because it loses out on so much potential, but the tier 1 variant dropped by the Carrion Crow in the research hall can be grabbed again during New Game Plus iterations, unlike any other rune, and can even be equipped multiple times. Hold on, no, fact check, I'm fact checking this, fuck that, there is no shitting way in unholy hell this is true. Oh, this just sounds like the perfect boat. Number 10, 11, and 12, the 3 Elemental Lake runes. Each of the first variants of this type of rune are found in decently early to mid-game locations, being Forbidden Woods for the Bolt defense rune, the Frontier for Fire defense, and Yahar'gul for the Arcane defense. The tier 3 variants of all these are going to be hidden in Chalice dungeons, the Fire and Bolt defense runes being found in Lower Ailing Loran, and the Arcane defense rune being found in The second Arcane Lake rune is actually located in Bergenworth prior to facing Rom, making it a bit more convenient since Rom has a lot of arcane damage attacks, but it's look, it's not that 7% more defense isn't decently helpful or anything. I don't want to sound like an ungrateful bitch who didn't get what he wanted for Christmas, but giving it to me before Rom just feels like a YouTuber apology video that's only sorry for the convenience. I'm still getting my ass flattened by the worst boss FromSoft has made in 11 years. 7% more arcane defense isn't going to be a bow on top of that present. Fucking whatever. Anyways, 5 to 10% extra defense against a certain element of damage doesn't sound like a lot, but these percents need to be contextualized first before they start making any sense. Like I said earlier, these flat numbers you see on the game's armor pieces can basically be thought of as 1% defense towards a specific type for every 10 defense that it says it has. So it might be easier for you to look at 7% arcane defense and just think, oh, so that's 70 more arcane defense. Basically just like a 5th piece of armor, more or less. Definitely enough to be be considered when it feels like you're barely surviving against a certain boss attack, or a certain area with certain enemies, or what have you. Pay attention to the defense stats on your current attire and slap on a lake rune to either compensate for low defense versus one damage type, or to even further heighten your defense versus a damage type you're already decently protected against. It's not bad. It's not really that significant either. The point of extra defense certainly diminishes pretty rapidly when going into higher New Game Plus iterations, and especially if you have plans to poke around in FRC dungeons, but that's also around the same time when the game just gets so difficult that one-shot prevention starts to become insanely valuable, and tripling up on a specific lake rune will absolutely give you that. Number 9, Lake. What's that one line I said in that video a couple years ago? Takes decades of practice to cast a spell, but anyone can punch a cunt in the face. Whatever, I'm sure the comments will remind me. Point stands nonetheless. Physical damage encompasses a massively common array of different slashes, gashes, bashes, and thrashes that you'll be dealing with right out of Yosefka's clinic all the way up to the end credits, making that seemingly inconsequential physical defense bonus a deceptively powerful number because of how frequently it's being shoved in your face. Physical damage also includes blunt and thrust damage, and even blood damage also gets treated as physical. Like, if you're thinking about tripling up on any lake rune, it really needs to be this one. That's just about 15% less of a beating you're taking from just about everything to do with the general experience. It is going to demand a bit of extra legwork from players since the tier 2 and tier 3 runes can only be found in root chalices, but like I said, I'm going to leave like a bunch of links and shit in the description if you want to go glyph hunting, so have fun with those. Number 8, Clockwise Metamorphosis. So, now that we've went over all the critical details of defense numbers and how they're applied, I think I'm pretty safe in putting this one where I am. It is true that defense bonuses from lake runes are multiplicative, but since we're multiplying into a number smaller than 1, that actually means less defense per bonus than it would be if the system were additive. Clockwise runes multiply a number greater than 1, which means buff stacking returns a slightly greater number each time. However, even with the playing field on defense math and shit being way simpler than I kinda thought, having more HP versus having more defense still might not always be what you want. Higher max HP means more damage done to you via frenzy application, and both slow and rapid poison being just a touch more inconvenient to play around if you don't have the consumables to deal with them. Then again, you also receive more healing per blood vial since that's also a percent based effect, and you can triple up the bonus for a multiplicative total increase of almost 33%. A boost so tremendous in size that it almost completely nullifies the 50% max HP penalty while in cursed dungeons. And on a build focusing on vitality and survivability, that bonus threatens to expand your health bar outside your bedroom door and onto your neighbor's property. It's so out of control. Number 7, Communion. More vials, more healing. More blood bullets, more shooty shoots, more moonbeams, more arrows, more augers, more healing. I will begin by directing your attention to the obvious. You can stack these, just like you can any other rune class of differing tiers, even if there's 5 of them. Same goes for the Quicksilver variant. In fact, common sense may point you to the Formless Oedon family of runes to maximize projectile spammage via bullets, tools, arrows, thoughts and prayers to send through the skulls of your enemies at lethal velocity. Yet in almost every literally every situation I end up preferring this one, even under those circumstances, because the sheer quantity of blood bullets you can feed into hunter tool builds with up to 12 extra vials jingling on your handy dandy hunter belt is enough to surpass the benefit given by Formless Oedon multiple times over. Now, the keen listeners among you will have already arrived at the conclusion that every advantage I just listed off at the start of this section can still be tapped into with more than a couple different build avenues. Oedon Writhe focuses on Quicksilver bullet regen instead of increasing your max bullet capacity, which in my opinion is 1,000 times more useful since your only other option when running low on bullets is to trade 5 for a hefty chunk of life force, and you can certainly keep that party going with triple communion, but you'll also notice the act of creating blood bullets will take away your HP while also allowing it to be potentially regained via rally. And with bosses you're confident you can parry, you can time the blood bullet buff right before they throw an attack, parry it, and then restore all the lost HP via visceral anyways. It takes a lot of practice, and I kind of fucked it up here in this footage, but if you're not running Blood Rapture, then this might be a cheeky way you can sneak in an extra 5 bullets and still keep yourself healthy. It's very hard though, I wouldn't depend on this. Number 6, the Eye. Alright, today y'all's ass is gonna learn about curses. You ever been poking around doing some sloppy sleuthing in a cursed dungeon and you're stocked with enough blood gems to open a private warehouse before you've even fully swept the first layer? Well, that's because of two things. One, you got the Eye rune on, and you would be correct in assuming it normally wouldn't make this much of a difference because 2, there's a super secret bonus formula fucking-tastic triple-decker sandwich discovery bonus that triggers when exploring cursed dungeons, but only if you're already wearing a rune that increases your item discovery. This bonus is way too enormous to pass up, and it's also yet another hidden stat that remains completely undetectable unless you're splunking around in the game's files like most of us have started doing in the past 9 months. So if you don't believe me, fire up a cursed dungeon, run it down the first layer without the Eye rune, then do it again with the Eye rune. I guarantee your second pass through will have you looting cursed blood gems off of every other enemy because of that huge discovery bonus. Just give it 5 minutes, your pockets will be jingling with some mad cash. Number 5, Anti-Clockwise Metamorphosis. Okay, so in Bloodborne, your innate stamina regen is some goddamn poopy. And unfortunately, the game gives you very little resources as a means of changing that, which gives Anti-Clockwise Metamorphosis a pretty humorously high spot for me, because I almost never feel like it's a spot that it actually put in the elbow grease for. All this time I've spent with green turtle talismans and chloranthy rings has shown me this rune is one easily accessible stamina regen tool away from falling a good 10 or so spots down the ladder. And the Hunter of Hunters rune doesn't count because that's an oath rune and we ain't doing those quite yet. I can, however, give points to the Anti-Clockwise rune for being able to work with the Hunter of Hunters rune to give you max stamina and more regen at the same time. It can make a lot of charged R2 attacks from different weapons feel way less cumbersome to perform. Weapons that need high stamina just for its basic R1s like the Amygdalin arm and Beast Cutter don't seem nearly as unwieldy as before. The dodge hit dodge dance versus other Hunter NPCs feel a tinge less miserable, and you tend to just always have room for one more action than normal. And you just happen to be playing a game where that is one of the foundational fucking ingredients for basic survival. Hunters. We have entered the ultimate finality, the topmost shelf of the wine aisle reserved for the richest of bitches handing out the thickest of stitches. This barbershop quartet of Carol runes hold enough combined influence to start their own religion if they wanted. Invest in big visceral today because stocks are heading straight to another solar system with these titans. I think I'm gonna start with Blood Rapture, the weakest of the 4 in my opinion, but only by a barely perceivable hair of strength. Blood Rapture restores 300 HP per visceral attack, which is a flat amount that can't be adjusted, meaning it'll pair nicely with builds that lean more into defense than max HP, but this HP restoration goes past the rally system and has no other condition tied to it other than the visceral attack itself. I really like using this rune with Fool's Blood gems because you can use the HP restoration to reliably keep the Fool effect active, and Poor Man's Gem effects get some spotlight too for a similar reason. The visceral damage is calculated before the healing actually takes place, so if your HP is too low for comfort, you can get the bonus damage from a visceral attack via Poor Man's effect and immediately receive the healing afterwards. Getting your hands on the tier 3 variant is a little long-winded since it involves the full completion of Eileen's quest, including the killing of the Bloody Crow, which biggest bitch of the whole 100-acre wood this fiend is. I hate fighting this motherfucker. It kinda makes me wish you just threw it in a chalice somewhere like the rest of the tier 3s. But combining all of them for the triple stack has you healing a grand total amount of 750 HP per visceral. To put things into perspective here, that's around the same healing potency as a Choir Bell at 40 Arcane. And the tier 1 variant is still obtained upon defeating Shadows of Yharnam that restores 200 HP per visceral. And if I'm being honest, even with a single tier 1 equipped, the insane difference that's gonna make early to mid game is nuttier than a mountain of skunk shit. Number 3, Oedon Writhe. You mean I can give out the world's deadliest colonoscopies and tap into a bottomless pit of quicksilver bullets at the same time? Gone are the days where we had to risk sudden anemia during a hunt just for an extra 5 bullets. Now you can just magneto those bitches straight out of your enemy's cardiovascular systems. Oedon Writhe is the king of momentum. It turns the single most tectonically stacked attack in your entire arsenal into a self-sufficient battery for continued use of hunter tools, moonlight sword beams, bow blading, bone ashing, or just more parries. Whatever you're in the mood for. Tools like a Call Beyond, Tiny to Nitrous, and the Choir Bell all have an extremely high bullet cost that kind of forces them into a limited capacity, even with resourceful use of blood bullets. With Oedon Writhe, Nah, no, we don't respect rules here. For as long as you can parry, you are always gonna have another salvo of space crap chambered and ready to fire. It is impossible to run out of Quicksilver bullets with this rune equipped, unless you're just forcing that to be true by not going for viscerals. Its benefits are easily awarded no matter your choice of setting, main story locations, main bosses, chalice dungeon bosses. As long as something on your screen can be visceraled, this rune will earn its keep and then some. You can target specific enemies with bullets as a main drop, finish them off with a visceral, and collect your 3 bullets on top of the amount they would have dropped normally. You don't even need the tier 3 variant if you're focusing on hunter tools, because the most expensive they ever get is 7, so 2 bullets from a visceral with the tier 2 rune equipped plus the additional 5 via blood bullets just opens up every single hunter tool for use post visceral. And since it uses visceral attacks themselves as the battery, staggered enemies via charged R2 from behind also trigger the bullet restoration. You could start a run with this and count the times you'd feel like taking it off on a single hand. I am the deadest of asses. Number 2, Heir. Heir gives you an additional percentage of echoes when a visceral attack kills an enemy, except it kinda doesn't do that. Like, that's not really how it, works. The rune applies an invisible bonus to your character that amplifies all echoes gained for around 6 seconds. The bonus window stays active for way longer than you'd need for one visceral attack, meaning pairing it with Clawmark can be a strong synergy, but it's not necessary, and in fact, I'm gonna tell you why you really don't want your first visceral to just outright kill whatever you're fighting. Now, the mission is always to get the job done, but the best hunters know how to have fun with their catch. So how about you give that bakery of yours a nice soft cushion to sit on, cause Uncle Rusty's gonna teach you the Charnel Lane shakedown. This seemingly insignificant little window of time where an enemy can be killed after a visceral to proc the bonus has a very amusing exploit. If you kill an enemy a few seconds after a visceral, you'll get the bonus. But landing a second visceral on any enemy within the time window given by the first will reapply the bonus on top of the bonused amount. The rune doesn't really even give a shit how you're landing the viscerals or whether or not they're on the same enemy. It's just a general buff that switches on for a very short amount of time when you activate it with the visceral. So even if you land the first visceral but fuck up the second, you still earned yourself 6 seconds of buffage, and whoever drops dead in the meantime will also get crammed into that bonus window. And when you're rolling out with 173% bonus from a full 3 stack of air buffs, and that gets multiplied? Oh! Oh my god. The fucking Thievius Raccoonus doesn't teach you tricks this dirty. Come Chalice, Infinite Echoes cheat, bitch, this is the cheat. The glitch is hacking their bank accounts and flushing out 6-digit sums of echoes like the Wolf of Wall Street, and now that long, arduous road to 99 arcane you once thought was impossible is suddenly just a few good boss fights away. Alright. Oh, sorry. Didn't see you there. I was just cleaning this giant list of people who were fucking surprised. Normally, this space would be packed. Being pushed into understanding viscerals and parrying this heavy-handedly, I started expecting to hear the joints in this game's fingers pop with how fucking old it is. The topmost shelf is a clean sweep of runes that all necessitate the use of visceral attacks in some way, and my own blue ribbon being awarded to the Clawmark rune now has me wrestling a non-consensual thought experiment that really makes me wonder what kind of game I'd be playing if this one attack wasn't gluttonizing half the game's acreage. Healing? Bullet restoration? A blank check with as many zeros you can fit on the top right of the goddamn screen, and now we're finally investing in the only possible thing left to even spec into, which is visceral attack damage. The previous 3 we talked about, even as powerful as they are, still have their core function rooted in that of support. Healing to just keep you alive, Yharnam's largest trust fund to help you climb to 99 arcane in record time, and finally, bullet regen to keep the momentum going once you're there. Basically just shit that's meant to feed into a secondary playstyle. But throwing on a full 3 stack of Clawmark runes is sending the game a crystal clear message that your plans for today have fucking changed. This already brings you an improvement of around 71% via rune buffs alone, but this 71% boost will then lend itself to other changes you've made to your visceral damage. And this game is brazenly unashamed of how easy its combat gets once you learn how. You can use thrust damage bonuses on adept blood gems. You can use Fools and Poor Man's bonuses to increase increase your overall attack power, which includes visceral damage. You can transform the cane to activate a hidden skill scaling bonus, which affects visceral damage, not by that much when you're late game and you're handing out like a fuckatillion damage per visceral, but it helps. I'm coming fresh out of NG +6 Orphan feeling thoroughly well rested. This is the build you hand your technologically inept grandmother who thinks the pretty colors in that $1,200 magic box might one day lead her speedrunner grandson down the road of domestic terrorism. The infinite glitches glazed prior have their place, but material wealth matters not when your opposition needs to book a chiropractor appointment after getting spine blasted and sent to hell by a naked man with a traffic cone on his head.